Leadership Reimagined, where game-changing conversations are shaping the world of work. I'm Lisa Buckingham, president of Ellig Group, Executive Search Advisors. At Ellig Group, we are pioneers in redefining executive search and leadership advisory through our unwavering commitment to presenting top talent solutions with a focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Today on Leadership Reimagined, our topic is 5 years of powerful podcasts, game-changing leadership insights. I'm so delighted to welcome Janice Ellig, CEO and founder of Ellig Group and creator of those podcasts. After a corporate career at Pfizer, Citibank, and Ambac Financial Group, where Janice helped take the organization public, co-authoring 2 books, Janice launched her career in executive search with a focus on changing the landscape of leadership. I joined Janice in February of 2023 after my career to continue Ellig Group's mission, and we focus on executive search, board searches, market mapping, leadership development, executive assessments, coaching, and building our new acquisition, the Board Academy boot camps. We have a little fun along the way. Janice, now you're on the other side of the podcast series you started pre-pandemic. I'd like to say you were ahead of the curve for sure. So I'd like to start with the why behind the conversations with 60 executives on Ellig Group's Leadership Reimagined Game-Changing Conversations. Why it was important to have these conversations. And I really hope that we can get from you, not just the why, but all the learnings that you've had over time.
Well, Lisa, first, I want to say how happy I am that you joined me last year to continue this mission of really changing the leadership landscape. So the why of this is we wanted to hear from executives. Remember, we're doing one a month. So for the past 5 years, that's 60 executives. That's a lot of wonderful leaders across the world.
And a lot of coordination. Let's just say that.
Yes. The why was we wanted to hear what was on their minds. How could we help with some solutions of issues that they were facing? And these were leaders from, all sectors. So global CEOs and board directors from energy, life sciences, technology, retail, banking. They're entrepreneurs, not-for-profit leaders, authors, Broadway and movie producers, all different, but all game changers, all impacting the planet in their respective areas. And so it has been an honor for me. And I want to thank those who may be listening to this to say thank you for giving us your time. The company had been, we were started in 1977. I was not here then. And the founders left in around 2000 when I came in. The partner that I was with, Susan Chaddock, retired in 2017. So we renamed the company Ellig Group with a tagline, which was reimagining search. To reimagine was we wanted to do it differently. And what we were hearing from these leaders was they needed things done differently. Now, post-pandemic, that has been accelerated, many, many times over, where we really have to think much more creatively. So the why was we need to know what's on your mind. And it's been an honor to hear what they had to say.
Well, I think about reimagining search and the thoughtful brand work that you did with that and how many people you spoke with. And I remember being a sitting CHRO, and you spoke with myself and our CEO, Dennis Glass, at the time to really talk about, does this brand resonate? And it was really a thoughtful launch for the Ellig Group, which has been amazing. And what I would say is Janice and I have worked together for 17 years. We did over 30 searches together, Janice, for executives and in really key positions across the Lincoln Financial organization. And I would really love for in this podcast for it to come out the why we kept coming back and using Ellig Group. But what I would love to have you just kind of speak about at this point is the focus with me and then with all these executives that you've worked with over time is you've always really thought about changing the landscape of leadership. What's on your mind from that perspective, and how does that look for us so we can understand what that means?
Well, I was in the corporate world, right? And so I saw up close and personal how women were not at the table with a voice. They might have had a title, they might have had the compensation, but they did not get that recognition in terms of the decision making. So being in corporate America and then while there, I started writing 2 books, and I co-authored one, which was called What Every Successful Woman Knows. And so in speaking with these women, I learned, and I felt it myself, in the corporate world, they didn't have a voice. And so how could we change that? Which meant getting more women into the C-suite. So you didn't just have one in the C-suite or one at the boardroom table, but you had multiples. And so the whole focus of Ellig Group has been to change the landscape of leadership with greater diversity at all levels, but starting in the boardroom and starting in the C-suite. And as the youngest of 3 girls, I was raised by a mother who said, stay close to your sisters. So I just expanded that to mean all women, and then also expanding it to other diverse groups that really did not have access, really were not being recognized, really were not in the network. If they didn't know you, how could they put you into a higher level position? So that has been what we've been trying to do. And something else that was aligned with that was the Breakfast of Corporate Champions, which we launched when I was president of the Women's Forum of New York, to recognize those companies that were above the national average of female representation on their boards. So in 2011, female representation on the S&P 500 board was 16.7%. We honored companies at 20% in 2011. This past biennial Breakfast of Corporate Champions was 2023, and we honored companies at 40%. So we've made progress, right? But the national average is 33. So we still have a long way to go. It's the majority of those board seats, the majority of the C-suite, still held by men, and predominantly Caucasian men. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, except you have to represent, and you should represent, your employees, your customers, your communities, and your shareholders. So our changing of the leadership landscape is focused on making sure that those individuals, women and underrepresented groups, have access, and they're noticed, they're in the network. And all of the 60 leaders that I spoke with over the past 5 years, they believe that greater diversity in their C-suites and boardrooms is absolutely where they should be. So they're working that all the time.
Janice, thank you for that. There's a lot here to unpack, and let's build on that if we can. Janice, 5 years and 60 podcasts. Big wow, really cool, lots of great learnings. Looking through the impactful themes of the podcast, let's focus on 3. Tell me about the themes that you're thinking about.
Well, the first theme, I think, that comes out loud and clear is on leadership, right? Every single speaker spoke about what they look for in leaders, how they value leaders, how leaders are going to really help them with these very complex, complicated global issues that every organization, from the corporates to the not-for-profits to the NGOs, they're all facing that. So I'm going to bucket the leadership attributes that these speakers talked about into 5 categories, okay? And it's what we here at Ellig call the 10 C's, but I'll focus on 5. So the first is, clearly, every leader was talking about character and integrity at the top. You cannot buy that. A consultant cannot give that to you.
And you can't train it either.
And you cannot train it. You have to do the right thing most times when nobody is looking.
Right.
You just know your strong moral compass. The second, and really important today, is about the compassion and caring. That's the second C. Mm-hmm. Employees have choices. They are going to go where they're going to be valued and where they know that people really think highly of them and they can have an input. So the compassion and caring piece of a leader is so important, particularly in today's market. And I'll just liken that to one example with Doug Peterson, the CEO of S&P Global, who said when he's traveling the world, he takes the time to have a day in the life of. So he's with a frontline worker, a day in the life of, to really know what is that individual doing. And I think that that is just so, about caring and being compassionate. And also it's about communicating, because he's hearing what that individual is saying. He's listening as well as communicating. So that third C on communication is really, really important as well.
Yeah, he was really showing up for the workforce, and it sends such an amazing message.
When Doug Peterson told me about this, takes that day in the life of, that's really telling that person they're important, that you want to hear from them. And so when you feel that, and I always used to say when I was in corporate America to my CEO at the time, your whisper is a shout in the organization. So CEOs really have to be cognizant of that. They have a lot of power there, but boy, they sit down face to face with that frontline worker. That puts them both in the same level playing field, and it feels so good to both people. And I would say the fourth is the commitment to customers, communities, investors. When CEO is really showing commitment to those customers in the communities, that's really saying they care. So an example would be Tim Spence of Fifth Third when he talked about the over 25 billion, maybe it was 30 billion, being invested in the underserved communities. And he said, if those communities don't survive, we don't survive. So that's part of ESG, but it's bigger than that. It's really investing in, society. And I think that the last C, or the fifth C here for CEOs, is you have to have courage, to be able to make decisions that are tough to make. So with those 5 C's, that's what we look forward to when we're interviewing leaders, as Lisa, that's really important. So we're looking at character, we're looking at compassion and caring, we're looking at communication, which includes listening, we're looking to commitment, and we're looking to courage. And all of those attributes are great. The table stakes here are you have to have the competencies, right? So anybody who's running a major organization, corporate or not, has to be able to really be able to navigate and know what they're doing. So the competencies are table stakes. Everything else are these key attributes that we look for.
I love that. And I have to say that courage is one of those when you walk in the room and you're not bringing in the best of news, right? And that's your job. And as a leader, grounding in that is really important. And the C's are really important. And leadership is something that, again, some of it can be learned and some of it's innate, right? I mean, at the end of the day. So we're going to move on to the next theme if we can. And it's really around culture and DE&I. And Janice, what I would really love to hear from you is, there's a lot in the news today about DE&I. There's a lot about culture, about retaining clients, retaining employees. What are your thoughts on culture and diversity today?
I have a lot of thoughts on culture and diversity. That's what we're all about, is making sure that everybody has representation equally at the top and in all levels of an organization. But, I think that when you walk into companies, you feel a culture. You feel how people, how they react to you, whether they're happy and that whether or not they're making an impact there. So I would say that, there's been much about, does diversity really make a difference to the bottom line? I think that argument could be, have we ever measured homogeneity? So I think you have to represent all constituents. But the main thing is just looking at some of the research. So Professor Michael Page, University of Michigan, wrote a book, The Difference, and said in that book, more heterogeneous groups, less skilled, make better decisions than more skilled, homogeneous groups. Now you think about that for a moment. So you can have everybody, all white men, all went to Harvard, okay? Or you can have people who didn't go to an elite school, great diversity there, and they're making better decisions. And one of the things they point to in the book is groupthink. People tend to agree with each other. So I think there's certainly enough research on that. McKinsey, Deloitte, Catalyst have all shown the business case, a correlation, stronger financial performance, not a causation, but a correlation. And I think you can't ignore that. And you can go back to some simple things like the 1970s, 80s, and 90s when they were looking at orchestras and the blind audition, right? Where they used to show women and women coming in with heels and what have you. Then they put a curtain up and women didn't wear heels. And the selection process was all based upon talent. 30% of new hires were women after the blind audition.
See, that's so cool.
So, it's just, it's one of those things that seems simple and but
it's strategic.
But it's strategic, but it's also just case in points that we have to pay attention to. Yeah.
That's really powerful. And I know there's a lot of, taking bias out of the recruiting system in many ways. And we can talk about that at another time. But our third theme that I wanted to really dig into was really...
Before we go there, can I just say that all of the speakers really talked about DEI and the importance of it in their organizations. And some like Sally Krawcheck talked about the importance of women's empowerment and through their having their financial independence. Robin Washington talked about inclusive cultures and the role of the board, making sure that the cultures were inclusive. Julie Sweet from Accenture talking about diversity. It would be so nice when it's just the norm. We don't even have to talk about it anymore. And Ron O'Hanley with Fearless Girl, that was symbolic, and she's now on Wall Street. I'm not looking at the bowl, but she's at Wall Street. And then Jeff Sonnenfeld of Yale talking about female CEOs and how important it is to have more of them at the, running companies. Carla Harris from her experience of being on Wall Street and how difficult it was. And so many other women that I spoke to on the podcasts, but to do it one person, one company at a time, and it will make a difference. So I could go on with all of these different speakers from, the corporate world to those in theater and Broadway, like Sarah Megan Thomas and Daryl Roth and Kathy Engelbert of the WNBA. So sports, theater, corporate. It is important to have greater diversity in all of these organizations at all levels. And these speakers agree with that. And they're making a difference. Mike Wirth, who's the CEO of Chevron, he says, I'm in the oil and gas industry. He said, I have 50% women on my board and diversity as well. He said, he said, every single one of them are just qualified beyond being a woman. So there really is no reason not to have that diversity in your organization.
And just thinking about all the folks that you've spoken to and bringing up those names and the courage they've had to bring up DE&I conversations.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. So
they've had
incredible.
the courage to say, whatever people may say with legislation and are we being fair to everybody, you have to look at who's been running these organizations, who's been the majority in the boardroom, and don't you have to have all boats rise?
So, Janice, thank you for that. And, the third area that I really wanted us to focus on is changes in the workplace. I know for sure during the pandemic, I was calling you a lot. You were giving a lot of advice. I spoke to a lot of CHROs and others really around what was happening on a daily, hourly basis for that. We all worked really thoughtfully together to think about what does the workplace look like. Let's talk about your learnings and the thoughts of the future of work. And I know it will be grounded in some of the conversations that you've had with many of these amazing speakers, but you also have some pretty strategic thoughts there as well.
Yeah, well, let me go back to the speakers again, because I think that's the foundation by which we are really changing a lot of how we are helping our clients with consulting assignments. And that is to really look at the workplace differently than they've ever looked at it before, because leaders today are going to have to look at each employee in terms of their needs. Again, the employees have choices. One size does not fit all. It doesn't fit all for the industry. It doesn't fit all for individuals. So it's really a matter of looking at when you're hiring somebody, right? What do they really need and want? Is there going to be a contract here where they're going to feel really good about coming into this company? And can you deliver on what they're looking for, meaning developing them, moving them up? So two authors that I interviewed, Adam Bryant and Kevin Oakes, really talked about the impact of digital transformation and what that's going to mean for employees in terms of their jobs changing, right? And then again, they may want to be working 2 days a week, but if they're a one-of-a-kind type of talent, you may have to accommodate that.
Yeah.
And if they are not, then maybe they're not right for you. But
that's a harder conversation,
It's
right?
a harder conversation. But it's really, people have personal choices. And so there has to be an agreement, sort of a new deal, a contract between the employer and the employee. And it doesn't have to be, onerous. I think it's a matter of people talking to each other. Yeah. In terms of what's our agreement in terms of coming into an organization.
Janice, can I push on you a little bit on that? at the lower levels in the organization, when people have a 9-to-5 job, I don't think there's as much strategic flexibility, if you might. But as you get more senior and you're bringing thought leadership, strategy into the organization, I think that really does make a lot of sense from a flexibility perspective. But you run a beautiful business and you want the phones answered. So you absolutely, you've created a very flexible working environment. You made massive changes post-pandemic with the organization. And we are a hybrid company, but we still are there for our clients. So how did you get there when you were switching from pre-pandemic to post?
Well, we were all home, weren't we? Everybody was working from home for like a year and a half. But I think what we did here was to say, we're going to have to service our clients 5 days a week, right? Yeah. And sometimes 7 days a week, because they send us a note or a text message on a Saturday evening that somebody so-and-so can't make that interview meeting. So you have to be responsive to your clients. That's what I'm saying. One size does not fit all. You really have to look at who are your clients, who are you serving, and what do you need to do for them? And then your people, right? Yeah. So we are in the office Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and working remotely on Monday and Friday. It works for us. But like I said, if there's something that comes in over the weekend, we're going to respond to that too. I think for the large corporations, when like Accenture, over nearly 800,000 employees, this is really tough in terms of how are you going to meet your client needs and your employee needs at the same time. And I would say within each organization, things may be handled differently as well. It takes a creative leader. It takes a creative leader who has the courage, to make different choices and set up different policies depending upon what the needs of the company are. There was a book that Deanna Mulligan, former CEO of Guardian, wrote, and she was, again, a podcast guest. It's called Higher Purpose, HIRE, meaning higher purpose and higher purposefully. And it's really her book focuses on reskilling the workplace within your company. And when I did that podcast, I said to Deanna, I said, but suppose, you've reskilled people and then they go and they leave. She said, but that's good for them. And then it's good for us if we get somebody who's reskilled from another company. Mm-hmm. So if you can make everybody reskilled throughout the country, if you can give people training and education all across, different levels and positions, everybody wins. And so I think the workplace of tomorrow is changing daily. And we just have to keep our eyes open about that, because we don't want to lose great talent.
Absolutely.
And great talent should also recognize that they have a responsibility to that company and to those clients that the company is serving. So it's a two-way street. It is a contract. Yeah. It is an understanding.
Like a social contract, right? I mean, at the end of the day.
But you have to talk about it, and so your leaders have to talk about it, not worry about litigation or things. We just talk openly as a person, people to people.
Yeah. When at Lincoln, we talked a lot about shared responsibility when it came to upskilling and digital transformations and things like that. And it really did bring all of us along together. So it was a, combined effort, if you might. So Janice, I'm going to switch over a little bit to strategic planning, if that's okay. Annual strategic planning has been something in the ethos of organizations globally for many, many years. 3 to 5 year strategies. We all can come and talk to the board. We can talk to our teams about what we are really, going to tackle and how we're going to achieve that. Today, it seems strategic planning in the world of work is changing almost daily. Really almost daily. So at Ellig, we're now being asked for more leadership advisory work. What do you think is happening? Why do you think we're getting those phone calls? And, I would love to just hear your thoughts about the landscape of what's happening on the leadership side.
Well, I think when it comes to strategic planning, every company has had to pivot and adjust their strategic plan during the pandemic, right? Mm-hmm. And, oftentimes the strategic plan is, put on a shelf That's not where it should be. It's a living, breathing document, and you want it to really speak to your employees, and that's why leaders have to really be good communicators in terms of where are we going, how are we steering this ship, and are we going in the right direction? Are we going to the right ports? Are we carrying the right products? Do we have the right team on board? So strategically, every company, every board needs to be reviewing that because the world is changing so rapidly. And I do think that, AI and other technology advances are going to change directions for a lot of different companies. So it's really reshaping world economies, reshaping how a company is really moving forward. And I think that you have to really leverage, as Stefan Tanda, CEO of Aptar, said to me, you really need to leverage the power of your people and your products in all strategic planning. It's about talent.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you don't have good people in the right jobs at the right time, you don't have anything. Right?
Yeah. Yep. And you and I have both had phone calls over weekends, holidays, things like that, where they want the board wants to hear from you or from me around ideas when they're challenged with something. And I think that helps augment their strategic planning process, or if it might be just a one hit or, something really on their mind today. From that perspective, you're seeing a lot of day-to-day changes in people's strategy. And if a key talent leaves the organization, there's a reset button that gets hit. And this is where you can come in as well.
Mm-hmm. I think, to be a good consultant, it really takes listening. So what is the issue we're trying to solve for, right? I mean, what is on that executive's mind? And I often think, I used to be, again, as I said, in corporate America, and consultants would come in and say, well, this is what you need to do. I don't think you tell leaders what they need to do. I think you listen to them and you offer alternatives. Mm-hmm. Or you say, well, you know what? We're not really prepared to do that, but we have a strategic advisor who we know can help you. So we've tried to surround ourselves here at Ellig Group with strategic advisors, partners, who we can say to our clients, this is the person maybe you should talk to about that. And you're really sharing the wealth of knowledge that's out there, even though it's not under your roof, so to speak. And I think that's one of the things leaders need to do, is to make sure they have the best advisors. And so we try to do that in the talent area. And if we think that, boy, this is crisis management, you need somebody to come in on reputational management, we can offer who might be good at that. And that's, these have been so many aha moments in terms of doing the 60 interviews that it's hard to put them all together, but there are a couple that I have.
Yep. But that also shows that we might not be able to help everybody, but we have amazing people that can also help and guide organizations, which goes back to where you started on relationships.
Yeah. You have to know what you're really best at, and then be able to offer that. And where you can't, that's when you have to bring in others. And I think you have to be honest with yourself and with your client about what you can and can't do. And I think that's our moral compass. Yeah. That's really the way we steer this ship.
Janice, that is so amazing. Given what you've just talked about, given the year that we just had, walking into and focused on 2024, you've painted a picture. What are you seeing for 2024 in search and leadership advisory?
Well, I think 2024 is going to be a good but a tough year. I don't care what business you're in, you really have to pay attention to those socioeconomic, geopolitical winds that are out there that, it's changing every day. So I think it's going to be good but tough. I think there are going to be opportunities, but with challenges. I think there are going to be winners and losers. I think the leaders will do much more listening to the front line. And they'll focus very much so on talent and culture. And they're going to look, the CEO can't do it all. And I see almost a reimagining of the C-suite and the board will be looking at the C-suite too. Is this team, if they have an expertise in finance or marketing or cyber, is this team reporting to the CEO? are they still able to swim in multiple lanes? Just like a board should be able to swim in multiple lanes. You can't just be this cyber expert around the boardroom table. Well, so too in the C-suite. So I think there's going to be a reimagining of the C-suite. Do we have the right leaders to pivot, to be agile enough to really make a difference for this company and to grow it going forward? So I think there are many challenges, and therefore for those of us as consultants, as advisors, in talent, in executive search, in assessing leaders, there's going to be a lot of great opportunities to help those leaders assess if they have the right talent in those positions.
And I think that reinforces the entire conversation around being a good colleague, being able to influence, being able to help your colleagues as well to really navigate in these uncharted times, which is really cool.
Yeah.
Janice, thank you for that. So are there any quotes or learnings from your over 60 podcasts or client conversations that really stick with you every day and really inform you to think or work differently?
There are many actually, but one was actually quite humorous, but it talked about how you have to really, as a leader, get in the trenches. And I think about that a lot. And this was with Carol Tomei of UPS. And Carol had told a great story about how she got into the position. And she said, but one holiday season, it was really tough. We didn't have enough. It was during the pandemic. We didn't have enough people to deliver. So my team and I were out there delivering. She said, and I did pretty darn well, except when it came to 2 big packages that I had to go up an icy driveway to deliver them. She said, I didn't do so well on those. It was too heavy. But that just talks about really getting behind your team and getting in the trenches and really knowing what needs to be done here. And I think every leader has to do that. But the one that sticks with me a lot is Jerry Stead. And Jerry Stead is a great leader, an entrepreneur. He's been CEO of 10 companies. And he now runs a VC firm, which is really focused on neuroscience issues such as diseases such as Alzheimer's and ALS, Parkinson's, and then in other areas on obesity and well-being. So he and his wife, Mary Joy, have just been, dogged about this. They do good and they make good at the same time. They've really given back. But one of the things that Jerry talked about in this episode was about, he said, I never thought I couldn't do it. I always thought I could make it happen. And he said, that's my rubber band story. You have to stretch the rubber band to see what you really are capable of doing. I said, but Jerry, the rubber band can break. He says, yeah, sometimes it can break. But you know where the breaking point is, and you've really stretched yourself. So I think about that in running this business, growing the business. What lines do we want to serve? What sectors do we want to serve? What offerings do we want to have? What's going to make us successful? It's the success of our clients.
Yeah.
And so when he talks about stretching the rubber band, and sometimes I do it a little bit too much with my people here, but that's okay. They're used to me. So that's one of the big things that I think about all the time, Lisa.
Yeah, I don't think you stretch us. You're giving us opportunity to grow more, honestly. And thinking about that, I've had those moments like I scratch my head when you say, well, we're not good at that. Let's give that to somebody else. Let's refer them to a different firm. And, but that's been a terrific learning for me that, if we can't do it really, really well, we're not going to do it. And
right.
that is our reputation, which right. I've learned so much over the past year. Janice, as we started the podcast today, we were talking about the last 5. We also sprinkled in that we're focusing on the next 5. And what are you most excited? Let's just stick to 2024 today. But what are you most excited about for our lineup of our guests that you're thinking about and who have confirmed?
Well, I'm really excited about being able to feature our first podcast guest in 2024, Ken Frazier former CEO and chair of Merck. He is somebody that I have admired for many years because he will stand up for what's right. In a political situation, he said, no, I can't be in that room with those decisions. When it came to various drugs or whatever, he knew the path to go down. And he's been a revered leader. In fact, he was, in 2021, the Women's Forum of New York gave him the Mickey Siebert Award for what he has done in terms of diversity at Merck. So I'm really excited to hear what issues are on his mind, what he wants to accomplish in his next chapter. Ken is very committed to 110, which is about getting Black employees over the next 10 years, 1 million of them, into productive and sustainable employment. So he's philanthropic. He's impacting society as he did as a corporate leader in the health sciences area. But he's really giving back to make sure that people have the education to move up. And again, access to opportunities. And that is a constant theme, I think, for all 60 executives. And now I'm going to hear from Ken Frazier. And I am honored to be doing this.
Yeah, it's going to be super cool to hear from him. And I mean, just at the Breakfast of Corporate Champions, he just filled up the room and everybody wanted to meet him, shake his hand, have a conversation. So I'm looking forward to hearing that podcast, Janice. I really appreciate your time today. Thank you, thank you, thank you. This was actually fun.
Well, Lisa, we're partners here, and changing the landscape of leadership with more diversity at all levels is a value here and a commitment we've made to our clients to always give them the most outstanding candidates. But because our slate of candidates are so outstanding, of women underrepresented, our placement rate is very high. And I'm really excited to continue that over the next 5 years with you by my side.
And it's an honor. It's an honor. And to our audience, thank you for tuning in to another game-changing conversation on Leadership Reimagined. You can find us on LinkedIn, Instagram, or visit our website at elliggroup.com. Thank you so much for joining us today, and please do consider us if you have executive search or leadership advisory needs, or if you just want to have a conversation about the talent landscape. Thanks so much and have a great day.